Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, friends. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Desi Novita. I am a student majoring in economics at Andalas University. On this occasion, I would like to share with my friend the result of the research I have done regarding the readiness of Andalas University students to welcome offline lecture. Happy watching video! I will convey the table of content from the result of my research. First, introduction. Second, methods. Third, result. Fourth, discussion. And finally, conclusion. First, I will start with introduction. Readiness is all the traits or force that encourage a person to act or respond to something in a certain way to achieve a goal. Readiness includes various things that are in the individual, both spiritually and physically, to give a reaction or response. Based on the law of readiness, the higher the level of readiness of an organism in dealing with something, the implementation of the behavior will lead to individual satisfaction so that the association is strengthened. Readiness to learn in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic needs to be a concern for every element in the campus environment because it is closely related to readiness to face risks that may occur. Various things can happen due to the unavailability of information about the condition of the spread of COVID-19 virus in the future. Therefore, it is necessary to examine the extent to which students are prepared to welcome offline lecture. Research on online learning obstacles among mathematics education students based on qualitative and descriptive studies result in several obstacles faced by students when studying online. These obstacles is a fundamental obstacle such as internet network constraint, limited learning future, and obstacles in learning service. The emergence of these obstacles will give impetus to immediately implement offline lecture. Various things need to be prepared so that face-to-face lecture can be realized, both in terms of preparing lecture schedules, structuring room capacity, laboratories, and monitoring mechanism for student and lecturer activities. Therefore, the authors are interested in conducting research in the theme Andalas University Student Readiness to Welcome Offline Lecture. Next, I will go to methods. The research used Andalas University students who took course in scientific writing techniques and English presentation in class E3 as research objects. The research sample amount to 24 people with background status as Andalas University students. The data collection methods used in the research on the readiness of Andalas University students in welcoming offline lecture is survey methods using a questionnaire instrument. In the questionnaire, several questions will be given, both open and closed questions. The number of questions asked in the questionnaire is 14 questions, consists of 4 open questions and 10 closed questions. After getting data from respondents, quantitative data analysis will be carried using descriptive statistical methods. In answering the research question, the average weight of each answer to the question asked by the respondent will be calculated. Thus, research result can be obtained whether to support offline lecture or to reject the application of the offline lecture. Then we move on to the result. The result of the distributed results show that there are 24 respondents in the study. The data obtained from the respondents were based on gender, where female respondents were 91.67% and male respondents were 33%. This means that the female gender dominates the composition of the respondent in this study compared to the male gender. There are several obstacles faced by students during online lecture. First, the result of a survey regarding student difficulty in understanding lecture material during learning showed that as many as 54.17% of respondents representing Andalas University students found it difficult to understand lecture material taught through virtual learning methods. Meanwhile, 33.33% of respondents did not agree with this statement. The other 4.17% did not find it difficult at all with virtual learning. The next problem faced by students when lecturing online is feeling overwhelmed in doing the task given by the lecturer. 58.33% of respondents feel overwhelmed in doing the task given by the lecturer. This, of course, has an effect in the form of a lack of student rest time because they are more mobilized to fulfill their duties to maximize their work. Moreover, as many as 25% of the respondents felt very overwhelmed in online lecture. Another 8.33% felt they were not too overwhelmed in doing their assignment. In the process of implementing online lecture, the majority of students also admit to feeling negligent in lecture because of the lack of supervision from lecture. Students begin to be trained in multitasking during online lecture. This is evident from other activities that students do during online lecture. For example, holding organizational meetings at the same time as lecture using two different devices. This recognition was conveyed by 41.67% of respondents surveyed. Even 16.67% of other respondents felt very negligent during the lecture process with lectures. However, there are still 29.17% of respondents who are serious about carrying out online lecture, and 4.17% of them feel serious. Based on the difficult experience by students during online lecture, a survey was conducted to see if students agree to carry out offline lecture in the midst of a pandemic that is not yet known when it will end. The results show that a greater proportion of respondents want to offline lecture. A total of 33.33% strongly agree that Andalas University conducts offline lecture, and other 29.17% also agree with offline lecture. Meanwhile, 29.17% other respondents disagree and still want online lecture while the pandemic was still ongoing. Based on a survey that has been carried out regarding parental consent, it is known that as many as 50% of respondents have obtained permission from their parents to carry out online lecture. This figure is quite large and indicates that some students have been permitted by their parents to carry out a lecture on campus. Regarding the financial condition of families affected by pandemic, 66.67% state that the family financial condition was sufficient for offline lecture. Regarding the financial condition of families affected by the pandemic, 66.67% states that the family financial condition was sufficient for offline lecture. This figure has exceeded half of the respondents who fill out the survey. Only 16.67% of respondents are still in poor financial condition. Other needs, both physically and non-physically, have been prepared by students as evidenced by 41.67% of respondents have prepared various things as much as possible for lecture on campus, and 45.83 have also made preparation even though they are not optimal. Meanwhile, the other 4.17% are still very poorly prepared to carry out lecture on campus. Then, related to student assessment of campus condition, it showed that as many as 70.83% of respondents said the campus conditions were conducive. In fact, 8.33% said that the condition of the campus was very conducive for lecture activities. Meanwhile, 12.50% of other respondents considered that the campus conditions were still not conducive for the continuation of lecture. In terms of readiness, students can be assessed as having sufficient readiness to carry out learning on campus. The majority of respondents who have been surveyed agree that learning is offline rather than blended or online learning. This is based on students who have reached a saturation point in facing online lecture, so that there is a lack of direct interaction with the outside world. However, this decision was accompanied by various considerations such as students and lecturers having to strictly implement health protocols, and all academics must be vaccinated before opening campus for offline learning. Okay friends, let's move on to discussion. For the first, I will explain to you effectiveness of learning methods. Each learning method, be it online, blended learning, and offline, has its own advantage to supporting student learning. Online learning, in terms of its advantage, namely being able to measure learning outcome effectively and more flexible in terms of time, and providing convenience in a place to access learning content and work on assessment. There are many breakthroughs in the approach used in online lecture that have success in increasing the potential of online learning massively. These new breakthroughs include lecture, the video and materials stored online, and the implementation of more interesting learning activities such as quiz, games, and interactive digital media content, and the use of social media in order to increase social interaction for learners with one another online and to facilitate peer assessment. Online learning supports the needs for education in the midst of limited time and things that can hinder the learning process directly. This is what makes the concept of online learning more varied, with a variety of learning needs. However, online learning does not fully have a positive impact on students because it can reduce student enthusiasm for learning, such as lack of preparation before lecture, limited interaction between student and lecturer due to network constraints, dishonesty during exam, and assessment that are piling up all the time. In addition, behavior in online learning is closely related to readiness to adapt to digital learning approach. If the ability to use digital media is not sufficient, it is possible that online learning will provide many problems in practice. Gradually, this problem will lead to boredom in students and have an impact on learning outcome. Blended learning is a learning pattern that combines direct teaching with online teaching as an effort to integrate the learning process with information technology that is growing. The effectiveness of learning through blended learning can be seen from the self-motivation of Andalas University students. This self-motivation has several elements, including encouragement to achieve something, commitment, initiative, optimism with indicators of the needs for lecture, time management abilities and preference, completing case studies, not give up easily, and being confident. So it can be said the self-motivation is an absolute requirement in achieving effectiveness in blended learning lecture. It means if the self-motivation element is in the personality of each student, then blended learning methods can provide maximum result. Offline learning is more teacher-oriented and the learning environment is constructed by the lecturer. This is quite different from online learning, which is more student-oriented and students themselves who build their learning environment. This means that in offline learning, lecture can provide better supervision of students and the provision of lecture material can be ensured to the student. If viewed from the aspect of effective interaction between student and teaching lecture, offline learning is better applied than online learning and blended learning. Lecture can ensure that students have understood the lesson or not. On the other hand, students can be more active in discussion with other students who are members of the class when presenting learning materials in group. Learning on campus also allows students to meet one another. This, of course, also has significant impact on student enthusiasm for learning. For example, students who may be lazy to study when they see other friends eager to learn will also be motivated. Meanwhile, if you study alone at home during online lecture and blended learning, you don't get motivated and feel burdened because there are no friends to discuss a learning material that you don't understand. Based on these various considerations, the effectiveness of each learning methods can be assessed. Maximum online learning and blended learning are considered unable to match the output obtained from offline learning. Second for discussion is readiness of students in welcoming offline lecture. The readiness of Andalas University students in welcoming offline lecture can be said to be quite good. Most Andalas University students agree with the offline lecture plan. The strongest reason for this agreement is the feeling of being bored with online lecture and the desire to meet fellow comrades in college and want to carry out organizational activities or other non-academic activity. The readiness of the student is also influenced by various other aspects that support lecture on campus, such as parental permission, financial conditions that have improved, and the condition of the campus environment that is quite conducive. The readiness of students in offline lecture must also be supported by thorough preparation in the campus environment before the lecture takes place. The campus must first ensure that all students and the academic community have vaccinated to minimize the possibility of the cluster emerging from campus. In addition, the implementation of health protocol must be carried out strictly, such as wearing masks, preparing hand sanitizer, and washing hands and avoiding crowds. Physical and mental readiness also needs to be considered to face unexpected possibility in the campus environment during the learning process. Finally, I will show for you the conclusion of the research. Most Andalas University students are ready to welcome face-to-face lecture. The level of readiness of students must also be accompanied by the creation of a campus climate that apply strict health protocol as well as setting ideal classroom conditions for students. This need to be considered so as not to have an impact on the emergence of new clusters from the campus environment. Various parties are expected to be able to understand the existing rules during the lecture process because with mutual awareness among the Andalas University academic community, this offline lecture plan can be implemented. Okay friends, that's the percentage result of the research I've done. Hope it is useful for you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.